Welcome to another album review. Today we'll be going over Matt Corby's Telluric. I hadn't actually heard this album before, and I had a friend suggest it to me. I woke up early one morning and I sat down on the couch. I put on the record, and what hit me was something that was totally immersive, and it felt both familiar and totally out there, kind of. And that's not saying a bad thing. It seemed as though the album itself immersed itself in this experimental R&B neo soul that it felt like it was close to me, kind of like a Marvin Gaye record, but yet at the same time so far out there that it was almost showing me things that I had not quite yet heard, but I was very interested in getting to know. Matt Corby kind of comes from this background of a singer-songwriter approach. He's released a couple of EPs where, maybe it was more folk-oriented or acoustic-based, but generally had this feel of looping, which kind of lends itself to this record, which is a full electronic record. It does have some similarities of his former work. But by electronic, I don't mean electronic music. I mean that it's live instrumentation, electric guitars, and drums, and keyboards, even flute at some points. But the looping itself kind of lends itself. Matt Corby must have experimented with a loop pedal to such a fine degree that he came out on top as far as being able to masterfully create these celestial kind of vocal backdrops to his actual music, and he uses them quite well. Even on some songs you could tell that is the centerpiece. The instrumentation in the background is kind of kept to a minimum as far as maybe even drum beats or just beatboxing by the actual artist. The celestial vocals themselves being the centerpiece, and the first thing that hits my mind is it's something that I haven't quite gotten familiar with or heard on another record, as far as somebody layering their vocal parts to be almost like a big band and throwing out these accents and familiarities and very odd but beautiful melody lines that kind of accentuate and bring forth this almost angelic choir into your ears. As far as his voice alone, it seems to be, it could go from very gruff, harsh, dark tones into these high falsettos that kind of make you feel as though maybe you're listening to a Marvin Gaye record, but they're not used to kind of show off how much vocal range he has. They're more or less used to bring the song forth and add texture and musicality to the actual song. As far as songwriting goes, it can go from very sparse instrumentation, like I said earlier, to these full-blown, almost epic feeling tracks in which it comes out of nowhere. It definitely has a crescendo effect. It goes from very dense into these almost explosions of music that sort of braid your ears in ways you might not have experienced before in an R&B kind of category. And as far as his guitar playing is another thing. He's a very, very great guitar player as far as being able to make these lines sort of intertwine with his vocals, and even have these counterpoint melodies that really fit in well over these layered vocal tracks. It's very reminiscent of maybe David Gilmour or Prince in a way that, his way of coming out of these musical elements where you wouldn't expect for it to come. He really pops it in there in a really interesting way that might not be familiar to a lot of people within that kind of genre or musical listening experience. he also has this kind of harder edged tone, maybe more reminiscent of Jimi Hendrix or Curtis Mayfield in the way that his guitar delivery comes across. It comes off very funky, but not overly funky that you might feel as though you're on a funkadelic record listening experience. It's more laid back affair, kind of like Curtis Mayfield, or even to throw it in there, maybe Barry White, where the guitar lines were just funky enough that you got the message, but it didn't dissuade. It wasn't a groove-based record as far as that is concerned, even though there is quite a groove feeling to this overall record. It's more of a chillaxed kind of listening experience. It's definitely supposed to be put on when you're sitting down and relaxing, and maybe if you're going through a time where you just want to wind down or contemplate. Lyrically, the music kind of touches on a lot of different things, from moving on from a lover to reminiscing about your current lover, and as far as your relationship status goes. It definitely has this feel of maybe like a 70s psychedelic record in the sense that it's very spacey, lyrically and musically. It touches on a lot of different things that might have been prevalent in that time period. Also, I feel as though the other instruments and players on this record, and production-wise, they really come together to kind of form this overall listening experience that is not a grand affair. And by not a grand affair, I'm not meaning it to kind of degrade the overall album itself. It seems as though this album was put together to kind of make a complete work and a complete kind of message that Matt Corby is trying to put across. As far as, there's not this overwhelming production value. It kind of stands in the way that, people in the 60s and 70s would do, where it's very analog sounding, and it's very meant to kind of portray the sense of the artist himself as the centerpiece. There's not a lot of soloing or heavy instrumentation underneath his vocals. And it really highlights how an artist in this day and age can kind of step away from trying to impress people as far as, see how much I can do. It really centers on Matt Corby himself as an artist, as opposed to, how many people I can cram on the one album, and how much sonic landscapes I can pummel into somebody's subconscious, and how great a lyrics I can write. It's really like an affair of, this is where I am at this current time, and this is what I'm feeling, and I hope it mirrors what other people see in me. It's more or less a record that's based on the individual's self. It's a record for him, I believe, and it really translates out very well to, the listener. It comes across as something that's very familiar and characteristically good. And not only that, but it kind of harkens back to some things that maybe we ourselves had probably wanted to hear, as far as artists, coming out with stuff like that, like the Black Keys and D'Angelo, or even Maxwell, or to go even further, the Daptone records, as far as Lee Fields and the Budo's band, and even Charles Bradley, his new album Changes kind of has a similar kind of feel to it, in which we want that kind of feeling. It's familiar to us. It's very great that you can hear something and it instantaneously kind of have an emotional contact with it. Though at the same point, this record kind of touches on a lot of experimental phases of things you haven't heard before, and kind of builds upon an already set foundation within the R&B or soul or neo-psychedelic or whatever you want to call it. It builds very well on that kind of foundation and expands even farther into a realm which kind of adds a lot of character and color to the overall sound already established. And not only is it a great record, but it's also a record that would give so many singer-songwriters an idea of where they could go as far as vocal instrumentation and layering your vocals and adding an overall underlying theme or underlying musical harmony without going so shrill and technical into maybe adding a million guitar effects or a million synthesizers or a huge string quartets or large horn sections. All these things are done with his vocals, which layer and make such beautiful choruses. It's almost reminiscent of a gospel choir that's a lot more experimental and totally ingenious. Kind of like if Explosions in the Sky had a chorus do a tribute album to them underneath Matt's vocals. And that's really the centerfold of this whole album. If you want to hear something that's totally genuine and comes from, it feels like Matt's inner self, musically, that's where it's all about. I don't really think it focuses so much on his guitar playing, even though it's amazing, or his lyrical genius, because even though that's amazing, but it really focuses in on his voice, which is the overall centerpiece to the whole affair. And it really brings forth, this kind of thought pattern or musical thinking that even with Stevie Wonder was, it's about my voice. Even though I'm amazing at everything else, my voice is still the centerpiece, and that's why you guys listen. There's no gimmickry here. He's not covering up all these eccentricities that he has as far as who he is or what he does. He full-blown gives it to you in one huge chunk, which, like I said, is the vocal looping that kind of brings it to the forefront. As always, we thank you guys for watching our album reviews, and please leave a comment in the comment box below. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and please check out this record. It is quite an amazing affair, and we hope to hear from you all soon. Bye!